You didn't arrive at this moment by accident. As the world grows louder and the turning of a new year approaches like an unwritten chapter, something subtle within you has begun to awaken. It isn't panic and it isn't urgency. It's a quiet understanding, a realization that this time, change cannot be superficial. Not habits alone, not routines, but the very foundation you stand on. You're not simply exhausted by distractions or overwhelmed schedules. You're weary of the constant inner conflict, the silent struggle against your own thoughts. And that's where this moment finds you, not as a burst of motivation, but as a return. A return to the part of you that longs for stillness, that seeks clarity, that remembers what it feels like to be whole. The Stoics believed that what we search for is never outside of us. Not in status, not in noise, not in recognition from others. It lives in how we choose to meet life itself. They didn't chase freedom as a destination. They practiced it moment by moment, breath by breath. And if that idea resonates, if you're ready to walk a path shaped by reason, strength, and quiet resolve, then let this be a beginning, conscious commitment to live deliberately, one step closer to the person you were meant to become. Most people don't listen until everything starts to collapse. They wait for the walls of their life to shake until careers fall apart, relationships fracture, motivation evaporates. Only then do they search desperately for answers. Thought the signals were always present, soft, persistent, ignored. That lingering sense of restlessness. Even when everything appears fine on the surface, that's the first warning. The anxious mental noise that continues despite no visible crisis, that's the second. These are not random discomforts. They're messages, signs that you may be living outwardly accomplished, yet inwardly disconnected. The real earthquake never begins in your calendar or your circumstances. It begins in perception. Somewhere along the way, you became so accustomed to reacting that you forgot how to respond with intention. Days pass without reflection. Emotions are obeyed without understanding. Decisions are made from pressure instead of principle. These are the quiet fractures that, over time, break everything open. It's easy to blame the world, the deadlines, the expectations, the constant noise. But look closer. It isn't the world that creates your distress. It's a lack of awareness of your own mind. You surrendered authorship and settled for automatic reaction. As Epictetus observed, what shapes our lives is not events themselves, but how we meet them. Yet most people never pause to question their reactions at all. Anger appears and words spill out. Fear arises and they run. Fatigue sets in and they give up. No pause, no reflection, just instinct. But you are not an animal and you are not a machine. You are a thinking being with depth. And depth demands awareness. Every real transformation begins at the same point, the moment you stop saying, "I don't know why I'm like this," and start asking, "What am I choosing not to see?" Awareness doesn't arrive dramatically. It's quiet. It's the instant you realize a routine is just repetition, not meaning. It's when anxiety stops feeling like punishment and starts revealing itself as a signal. Your mind asking you to wake up. You don't need to destroy your life to change it. You need to stop moving through it unconsciously. When you live in constant reaction, even small disruptions feel catastrophic. One message ruins your mood. One look makes you doubt your worth. One mistake sends you spiraling, not because life is cruel, but because you've lost touch with your center. This is what Stoicism teaches so clearly. Your mind is your home, and if you don't tend to it, anything from outside can take control. You cannot command the winds of the world, but you can strengthen your inner stronghold. The earthquake isn't here to ruin you. It's here to reveal what was built on unstable ground. And anything that collapses under pressure was never meant to carry you forward. Carl Jung warned that until the unconscious is made conscious, it will govern your life and you will call it fate. This is the truth many avoid, because seeing clearly means accepting responsibility. Not blame, but responsibility. And responsibility is freedom. When you recognize the patterns you never questioned, You stop seeking new outcomes with the same old behaviors. You pause, you reflect, and gradually you change. Awareness is the birthplace of every shift, but it's uncomfortable. It strips away pretense, shows how much of your day is driven by fear, fear of falling behind, fear of missing out, fear of not being enough. It reveals how easily busyness replaces purpose. That confrontation can feel like a breakdown, but it's a breakthrough. Because only when the false self loosens its grip can the real self emerge. This is why the coming year must be different. It's not louder, not faster, filled with more goals stacked on top of a fractured foundation, but deeper, more honest, more rooted. You're not here to perform a revised version of the same identity. You're here to return to what's true beneath the noise. The inner upheaval isn't meant to destroy your life. It's meant to show you where presence was missing, where comfort replaced growth, where the volume of the world drowned out your inner wisdom. And when you meet that disruption with awareness instead of panic, with reason instead of reflex, everything changes. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become steadier, clearer, quieter inside. And from that stillness, you don't merely endure life, you shape it. So the question is no longer how to stop the earthquake. The real question is, what have you been building on ground that cannot hold you? Because once you see it, you can rebuild. Once you feel it, you can listen. And once you truly wake up, there is no return to sleep, not because awareness is easy, but because unconscious living becomes unbearable. Growth begins the moment you stop running from your inner tremors and start moving toward their source. There is a place within you that remains unmoved when the world shifts. It doesn't shake under criticism. It doesn't collapse when plans fall apart. It doesn't seek permission to feel whole. The Stoics called this the inner citadel, not as metaphor, but as lived reality. Somewhere along the way, you stopped returning there. Life pulled you outward into roles, obligations, identities. You began to believe peace was something to earn or receive from others. But peace was never outside. It was simply forgotten. Every surge of panic, every shallow breath, every racing thought comes from the same illusion that the world can reach inside you and decide your worth, that someone's words or silence can dismantle who you are. But it can't. It only feels possible when you're disconnected from your center. The fortress isn't built from stone. It's built from stillness, isn't defended by walls, but by awareness. And the more you remember that, the less life's resistance will shake you. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul takes on the color of its thoughts. And this is the trap. You don't need chaos around you to feel overwhelmed. You only need chaotic thinking. You don't need real danger to feel afraid. Only the belief that the voice in your head speaks truth. That voice doesn't come from your citadel. It comes from what you absorb from comparison, urgency, and the need to prove yourself. The world taught you to perform. Your inner fortress never did. It only asks one thing of you: to return. There's a quiet kind of suffering that emerges when you keep trying to repair something that was never broken. You chase validation, push yourself to be more productive, demand constant improvement, believing that peace will arrive once you've done enough. But peace is not the prize for self-criticism. It grows from self-trust. Real strength doesn't come from piling more onto yourself. It comes from removing what was never truly yours. To carry, that is what the inner fortress provides, a space untouched by the outside world. No matter how loud life becomes, it cannot disturb what is anchored in stillness. Many people assume peace will come once the noise fades, once circumstances improve, once others behave differently. But that kind of peace is fragile. It exists only as long as conditions cooperate. And when they don't, when you're misunderstood, when plans collapse, when certainty disappears, what remains? The fortress is not an escape from life. It is the ability to remain steady within it. When you remember how to rest inside your own presence, the world loses its power to dictate your inner state. You don't rebuild this inner ground through force or pressure. You return to it quietly, through honesty, through silence, through moments when you tell yourself the truth, even when it stings. You begin to remember that you are not how others define you. You're not your title, your income, or your past mistakes. You're not even the thoughts you've repeated for years. You are the awareness that notices them. The observer who chooses what deserves space and what does not. Seneca once wrote that no one is more unfortunate than the person who never faces adversity, because they are never given the chance to discover themselves. Perhaps that is what this moment exists for, not to avoid discomfort, but to realize it cannot destroy you unless you forget who you are. Every emotion that unsettles you is asking the same question. Have you stepped outside your inner ground? Anxiety appears when you compare yourself to things beyond your control. Anger arises when you hand your calm to someone else. Desperation surfaces when you tie your peace to a specific outcome. That isn't weakness, it's forgetfulness. And the remedy is not winning more, it's returning to yourself. The door to your calm was never locked. You were simply knocking everywhere else. No amount of success, recognition, or certainty can replace the stability that comes from being centered. When you return to that inner citadel, you don't become distant. You become clear. You don't reject the world, you engage it differently, with less urgency, with intention instead of impulse. You begin to guard your time, your attention, and your values not through aggression, but through quiet resolve. Because now you know what belongs to you and what never did. Aristotle said that knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom. But this knowing goes beyond labels and history. It is recognizing the part of you that remains untouched by loss, unaffected by applause, steady through change. That is what the fortress holds. And the more familiar you become with that part of yourself, the less dependent you are on life unfolding perfectly. Carl Jung described the self as a center everywhere and a boundary nowhere. Seen this way, the fortress isn't a hiding place. It's a way of living. It allows you to move through the world while remaining rooted, to experience joy without clinging, feel sorrow without breaking, to receive praise without inflation and rejection without collapse. This is not indifference. It is inner order. And inner order is rare. It is powerful. You won't often be reminded to return there. The world will constantly pull you outward into reaction, comparison, performance. That's why you must pause when you wake up, when your focus slips. When someone's words echo too loudly, ask yourself, have I stepped away from my center? And then choose to return. But by escaping life, but by being present, by breathing, by releasing what was never yours to hold. The fortress is not imaginary. It is your birthright. But it must be remembered, cared for, and entered daily. Storms will still come. The winds will still howl. But when your foundation is internal, you are no longer dragged in every direction. You don't need everything to be calm. You only need to remember where calm truly lives. It has been waiting for you all along. Most people spend their lives trying to control what was never theirs. They reorganize their days around uncertainty, obsess over how they're perceived, and cling to the belief that peace will arrive once the outside world settles. But it never does. And deep down, you already know this. You felt it every time you tried to manage someone's opinion and ended up drained.
Oh, yeah.
Every time you planned a flawless future and watched it unravel. Every time you gave your energy to things that never asked for your consent. There is a subtle suffering born from the illusion of control, because no matter how tightly you grip, life continues to move. Here is the truth that changes everything. Control is not a feeling, it is a choice. And it has nothing to do with the world, it has everything to do with you. You cannot choose outcomes. You cannot command others' behavior, but you can choose how you respond. You can decide who you will be in uncertainty. That choice may feel less dramatic than controlling your environment, but it is the only power that cannot be taken from you. This is what the Stoics called the dichotomy of control, the clear line between what is yours and what is not. Once you learn to live by that line, clarity follows. Consider how much energy you've spent trying to influence the unchangeable. Unanswered messages, lost opportunities, misunderstandings. You analyze, anticipate, worry, thinking it will prepare you. But worry is not preparation. It is resistance disguised as strategy. It drains you. What if that energy were redirected toward what you can shape your thoughts, your intentions, your character? Imagine the strength that would emerge if you stopped bending the world and learned instead to stand calmly within it. Emotions pass. Highs fade. Panic dissolves. But your choices remain. How you carry yourself when disappointed. How you speak when anger rises. How you move forward when plans fail. These choices shape your life more than anything outside your control ever will. The Stoics never promised comfort. They promised clarity, because clarity prevents you from wasting strength on storms you were never meant to stop. Seneca reminded us that much of our suffering exists only in imagination. Look closely, and you'll see that pain often comes not from events, but from resisting them. You thought control meant changing outcomes, but real control is changing interpretation. The moment you stop needing everything to go your way is the moment peace begins, not because life softens, but because your mind steadies. Many confuse control with tension. They think being in control means staying alert, correcting, anticipating. But that is fear, and fear creates reactivity. It convinces you that effort guarantees certainty. The Stoic does not seek certainty. The Stoic seeks alignment with reason, with virtue, with deliberate choice. When you align with what is within your power, the rest loses its grip. A deep relief follows when you stop managing the uncontrollable, when you stop measuring your worth against others' reactions, when you do your part fully, honestly, and release the rest. That is not passivity. That is mastery. It takes strength to focus only on your side of the equation. It takes clarity to remain still while the world spins. That stillness is not detachment, it is wisdom. Epictetus said that freedom is achieved by letting go of what lies beyond our control. And that freedom doesn't feel like force. It feels like space room in your chest, quiet in your mind. You stop carrying outcomes. You begin to move differently. You decide from clarity, not desperation.
Yes.
You speak from integrity, not approval seeking.
At.
You give without attachment and release without panic. The world will continue to shift. People will misunderstand you. Plans will break. That will not change. What must change is your relationship to it all. You are not here to micromanage life. You are here to act with intention, fulfill your role, and then let go. Not because it doesn't matter, but because that is where responsibility ends and real power begins. Even Aristotle emphasized that virtue lives in deliberate choice, not emotion or impulse. So the question is no longer, can I control this? The real question is this mine to control at all? And if it isn't, then it is not yours to suffer over either. When you understand this, you begin to protect your peace the way. You protect your time. You stop giving it to opinions, to headlines, to someone else's emotional storms. You learn to say, this is not mine, and you let it pass. That is not avoidance. That is clarity. And clarity creates a peace that does not depend on outcomes. A peace that holds you steady while everything else moves. You reach a turning point when you stop giving away the most valuable thing you possess, your response to situations that never deserved that power. Control is not something you stumble upon, something you decide to claim. And the more consistently you choose what belongs to you, the stronger you become. It's not because you can bend the world to your will, but because the world no longer bends you. That kind of strength is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It transforms everything starting from within. You may have felt it before, as if life keeps pushing back no matter how carefully you plan. You prepare, you push forward, you do everything right, and still things drift off course. Delays appear, detours interrupt, regret, disappointments land. Without warning, so you tighten your grip, you try harder, you think more. And without realizing it, you turn your inner peace into a battleground. But life is not something to overpower, cannot be forced into stillness. Life moves like a river, and rivers don't respond to pressure. Most people aren't exhausted because they're moving too fast. They're exhausted because they're resisting what's already moving. The fatigue doesn't come from effort, but from friction, from fighting reality instead of meeting it. You can recognize this state easily. Every inconvenience feels personal. Every challenge feels like an attack. But life isn't targeting you, it's flowing. And when you try to stand rigid in the middle of that current, you're not punished. You're simply pulled under, not out of cruelty, but because that's what happens when force meets flow. Letting go is often misunderstood. Many hear the word and think it means surrender or weakness. But acceptance is not defeat, it's strategy. Letting go doesn't mean doing nothing. It means refusing to spend energy on what cannot be changed. That refusal is strength. It's clarity. It's the moment your real power begins to surface. When you stop fighting the current, you learn how to move with it, how to adjust, how to redirect, how to advance without exhausting yourself. There is grace in knowing when to pivot instead of push, when it's not the plan that needs more effort, but the mindset that needs to shift. Sometimes you don't need a better strategy. You just need to stop demanding that life mirror your expectations. The Stoics never taught passivity. They taught precision, seeing what is, not what you wish it were. Control feels like safety, but if that were true, the most controlling people would be the most peaceful. They rarely are. Control agitates the mind because it ties your calm to things that were never meant to be stable markets. Whether timelines, other people's behavior. Each time you demand these things stay fixed for your comfort, you hand your peace to uncertainty. That's not strength, it's dependence. What you need is not to stop the river, but to understand its rhythm. Some days require adjustment. Others require stillness. Sometimes they require releasing the very thing you thought you needed most. That isn't failure. It's intelligent movement forward. Carl Jung observed that what we resist tends to persist and often grow stronger. The more you fight a situation, the more influence it gains over you. But the moment you release the need to struggle, the weight of it lessens. Not because the situation changed, but because your relationship to it did. You've seen this before. The difficult conversation you avoided for months, only to realize it wasn't as devastating as imagined. The loss that eventually opened up Doria never would have considered. The plan that collapsed and made room for something better. None of those shifts came from force. They came from trust, not blind trust in fate, but trust in your ability to respond wisely. This is what it means to navigate the river, not drifting aimlessly, but guiding yourself with presence instead of panic. Slowly, you realize that when life doesn't go your way, it isn't necessarily going the wrong way. You simply don't see the whole picture yet, and you're not meant to. Your task is not to control what's ahead, but to meet what's here. That understanding lightens the load you've been carrying, the pressure to predict, to manage, to manipulate outcomes. It doesn't make you careless. It makes you discerning. You care without clinging. You act without gripping. Your peace is no longer hostage to whether life follows your script. Epictetus reminded us that events themselves are neutral. What gives them power is our judgment. The surge of water isn't the enemy. The turn in the current isn't failure. It's movement. And your strength lies in how you meet that movement. Do you tense and sink, or do you breathe, adjust, and continue? Even Plato spoke in his own way about this adaptability. Wisdom to him wasn't sit, was alignment. The ability to recognize patterns and move in harmony with what is. Wisdom is not rigidity. It's flexibility guided by purpose. And when you cultivate that inner flexibility, nothing breaks you. You bend, you shift, remain whole. So if you've been feeling worn down, overwhelmed by the effort of holding everything together, it may not be because you're weak. It may be because you've been trying to stop a river with your bare hands. Maybe it's time to loosen your grip. It's not in surrender, but in strategy. To glide instead of strain. To work with life rather than against it. This year isn't asking you to fight harder. It's asking you to move smarter. To stop demanding that everything bend to your will, and start noticing how much lighter life becomes when you move with its rhythm that isn't giving up. It's growing up. It's choosing clarity over control, presence over panic, direction over resistance. Let go not because you don't care, but because your energy is too valuable to waste on battles that lead nowhere. Let go so you can finally move forward. Most people wait for perfect conditions before they allow themselves to feel okay. They wait for clear skies, calm winds, and certainty before they act or breathe fully again. But life doesn't work that way. The weather changes. Storms linger. Light arrives late. And still, you are not powerless, because your power was never in controlling the sky. It was always in tending the ground beneath your feet. Think of your mind as soil. Whatever grows, their strength or doubt, clarity or fear, depends on what is planted and what is nurtured. Left unattended, it doesn't remain neutral. It grows whatever falls into it. This is where many lose their way. They wait. They distract themselves. And while they look outward for better conditions, unwanted habits quietly take root. Doubts spread. Avoidance settles in. Small fears grow deep underground. And one day, they wake up in a life that no longer reflects who they truly are. But you don't need perfect weather to grow something meaningful. You need daily care, awareness, the willingness to notice what's growing and ask whether you chose it. To remove what doesn't belong, not with frustration, but with attention. The mind is not a battlefield. It is a garden, and even neglected ground can be restored. That is the quiet miracle. No matter how overgrown it becomes, renewal is possible if you begin today. So ask yourself, what are you feeding? What thoughts are you repeating? What habits are you watering? Every repeated idea is a seed. Every ignored emotion sends roots deeper. And just because the damage isn't visible yet doesn't mean it isn't forming. Over time, thoughts become patterns. As patterns shape identity, and identity begins to look like fate. But fate is not fixed. It is simply the result of what you cultivated, intentionally or not. Seneca warned that true poverty is not having little, but always wanting more. In a world that urges you to chase, control, and accumulate endlessly, real wealth looks different. It lives inside. It's a steady mind, clear values. It's a sense of inner sufficiency that storms cannot uproot. The danger comes when you blame the weather. You forget that tending your own ground has always been your responsibility. Every gardener eventually learns this truth. Wind will come, heat will scorch, and rain will sometimes arrive too late or too hard. No one is exempt. The difference is never the weather. It's how each gardener prepares, how they adapt, and whether they return to the soil each day regardless of the forecast. That is the heart of Stoicism. It's not emotional numbness, but discipline. It's not escape from life, but clarity within it. Peace is not something you wait for. It's something you construct. Slowly, intentionally. One thought examined. One routine honored. One morning you showed up when it would have been easier not to. One uncomfortable truth you finally stopped running from. This is how inner stability is built, not through dramatic change, but through consistent attention. And then there are the cold seasons. The days that feel like frost when hope seems burned away, and you wonder whether anything worthwhile can grow again. Stoicism never promised immunity from these moments. It acknowledged them. Those seasons prune you. They test what's real, expose shallow roots, and force deeper ones to form. They teach you what endures and what was only temporary support. You don't flee those periods. You study them. You learn what failed and why. You refine your focus so that when warmth returns, you're no longer guessing what deserves your energy. Growth doesn't come from avoiding hardship. It comes from allowing hardship to educate you. Aristotle observed that we become what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not a single act, it's a habit formed quietly over time. This isn't about grand gestures or sudden reinvention. It's about returning to the soil daily, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when progress is invisible. Every time you remove what drains you, you make space for what strengthens you. Every time you nurture a better habit, you reinforce your foundation. Even on days when nothing seems to change, your presence matters, because it does. Growth often happens underground long before it's visible above the surface. When you pause before reacting, you tend your inner ground. When you choose clarity over chaos, you deepen your roots. When you resist the urge to measure your life against someone else's harvest, you protect your peace. A real gardener doesn't envy other gardens. They commit to their own. This is your space, your mind, your values. Storms will come, but storms pass. Weeds can be removed. Soil can be renewed. What matters most is that you don't abandon it. That you don't hand responsibility for your inner world to forces that were never meant to care for it. Your inner life is not the world's responsibility. It's yours. And the more seriously you honor that truth, the more stable you become, Marcus. Aurelius reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It's steady, rooted, quietly reliable. It adapts instead of arguing with reality, keeps going. So perhaps this isn't the year to control everything. Perhaps it's the year to care deeply for what already belongs to you. Your thoughts, your space, your attention. Let the storms come. Let the winds rise. You have discipline, you have awareness, you have choice. And most importantly, you have the garden. Don't wait for peace to arrive by chance. Plant it, water it, protect it. It's already within you and it's been waiting. Now, consider what happens in a single moment. You arrive late. A meeting has already started. Payment doesn't clear. Someone speaks carelessly and it cuts deeper than expected. The event itself is real. But what follows the weight, the emotion, the spiral, comes from the meaning you attach to it. Suddenly being late becomes a story about failure. Losing money becomes a prediction of collapse. A careless remark becomes proof that you're not enough. But those conclusions are not facts. They are judgments. It's judgment more than circumstance that causes most of our suffering. We often believe pain comes from the outside. The deepest wounds are usually self-inflicted, created when we accept a thought without questioning it. The mind doesn't simply record reality. It interprets it. An interpretation shapes everything. That's why two people can experience the same setback and walk away with entirely different outcomes. One sees defeat, the other sees information. One sees rejection, the other sees redirection. Same moment, different lens. This is where Stoicism reveals its humanity. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about understanding where emotion begins. Most suffering doesn't come from the event itself, but from the mental chain reaction that follows the assumptions, the self-blame, the imagined future disasters. Carl Jung warned about projections, the unconscious stories we cast onto people. In situations, till we recognize them, we don't respond to reality. We respond to distortion. Single criticism becomes a verdict on your worth. You withdraw, you defend. You reshape yourself to avoid imagined judgment all based on an interpretation that may not even be true. What makes this dangerous is its speed. A glance, a tone, a delay, and before awareness catches up, the judgment has already written a narrative in your mind. The Stoics trained themselves to pause right there, to notice the story forming and ask, what am I telling myself? Is it useful? Is it true? Most people never stop to ask. They confuse thought with truth. But a thought is only a lens, and lenses can be cleaned. Aristotle noted that an educated mind can entertain an idea without accepting it, can feel an emotion without surrendering to it, can observe a judgment rising without obeying it. This isn't suppression, it's sovereignty. When you slow down and investigate instead of reacting, you create space. And in that space, you regain choice. This practice isn't glamorous, it won't impress anyone, but it will spare you from unnecessary suffering. There are real things worth grieving, real injustices worth confronting. But clarity matters. Disrespected is real. Concluding that you're worthless is not. Falling short is feedback, not a sentence. The Stoics weren't emotionless. They were disciplined. They understood that emotions signaled something, but they don't always explain it accurately. Your task is to listen, question, and refine until You reach something solid. Judgments often disguise themselves as truth, but many are simply defenses against uncertainty. Meaning is not fixed. You can revise it. You can replace panic with presence if you pause long enough to notice the lens you're using, Marcus Aurelius wrote. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of attendance. You have the power to revoke. That isn't philosophy for books. It's a survival skill. The moment you stop granting your judgments unchecked authority, you reclaim your life. You feel the setback without collapsing into it. You see the flaw without becoming it. This is where freedom begins, not by changing the world, but by refining how you meet it. Life will remain unpredictable. People will remain imperfect. But your inner state doesn't have to be their casualty. So the next time something happens, pause. Ask yourself, is this fact for a fear-wearing certainty's mask? That moment won't change the event, but it will change how you carry it. How you carry it changes everything. Judgment is a lens. Clean it often. And remember, you can always choose a clearer view. You walk into a room and instinctively scan faces not for danger, but for approval. A nod lifts you. A silence deflates you. Feels natural, social, human. But beneath it lies a quiet habit. Most never question. You've placed your worth in other people's reactions. People who may not even remember your name. Slowly, silently, it drains you. Not all at once, but day by day. At some point, almost everyone learns this pattern. We survive by blending in, by pleasing, reading the room, and adjusting ourselves like a reflection, becoming whatever feels safest in that moment. And yes, sometimes it works. Conflict is avoided. Approval is earned. You feel accepted, but something subtle begins to happen beneath the surface. You forget what it feels like to speak without waiting for a response. You forget how to move without checking who's watching. Life becomes a performance, every word rehearsed, every action measured, always waiting for applause that isn't living, that's slowly leaving yourself behind. Carl Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are, but becoming doesn't require rebellion or coldness. It requires detachment, the quiet strength of someone who no longer needs to be chosen to feel worthy. When your sense of self is ruled by opinions, you become a voluntary prisoner. The cage isn't locked. It's built from your need to be liked. Every time someone doesn't respond the way you hoped, the walls tighten. The truth is uncomfortable, but liberating. You've always held the key. Seneca warned that the one who lives for approval hands their life over to others. He wasn't condemning connection. He was warning against dependence. There's a line between caring about people and being owned by their reactions. That line is crossed every time you betray yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Every time you soften your truth. Every time you stay silent to avoid rejection. Every time you agree just to maintain peace. But peace doesn't come from compliance. It comes from alignment with your values, your voice, your direction. There's a quieter version of you waiting behind the curtain, not louder, not flashier, just more honest. The one who speaks clearly even when their voice shakes. The one who walks away when something feels wrong, even if it means standing alone. That version doesn't chase admiration. It seeks wholeness. And that shift, when you stop auditioning for roles that were never meant for you, is where real confidence begins. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that doesn't need it. The world will always comment on your choices, your body, your work, your silence, your courage. If you bend to every opinion, you don't become adaptable, you become hollow. An identity built on approval has no foundation. One day you're praised. The next day you're questioned. You can't build inner stability on something that changes with the wind. That's like trying to construct a home during an earthquake. Instead of asking, do they like me? Ask something harder. Do I respect myself right now? That question brings you back to center, because you can win the crowd and still lose yourself. You can be visible, applauded, admired, and still feel empty. Applause isn't alignment, and being noticed isn't the same as being known. This isn't a call to rebellion. It's a return to your core. You're not here to impress, you're here to express. Not to prove your worth, but to live it. You don't need louder opinions. You need a quieter mind. One that doesn't flinch at disagreement. One that doesn't collapse under criticism. That's the difference between chasing peace and becoming it. You are not a product. You are not a brand. You're not the sum of likes, shares, or nods of approval. You are a human being, complex, layered, imperfect. Your truth won't always fit neatly into someone else's comfort. Sometimes the strongest move is not explaining, not convincing, just standing still, rooted in who you are, even if no one claps. Think about how much energy you've spent adjusting for others. Now imagine what could happen if that energy returned home. It's creating because it matters to you, speaking because it's true, showing up without masks, filters, or constant reassurance that life isn't loud, but it's free. And freedom never asks permission. The path away from approval dependence isn't isolation. It's discernment, knowing when feedback helps you. Grow in when it's just noise meant to shrink you. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every rejection deserves your retreat. You don't need to become cold to be free. You only need to stop negotiating your worth in every room you enter. The most powerful people are rarely the loudest. They don't panic when misunderstood. They don't chase validation like oxygen. They move with quiet authority built over years of choosing integrity over popularity. That isn't arrogance. That's self-respect. You've spent enough time editing yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for you. It's time to build something of your own, a mindset, a mission, a life that doesn't require applause to feel alive. You are not here to be liked. You're here to become. Becoming is rarely celebrated, often unseen, but it's always worth it. Because when you stop begging the world to recognize you, you finally recognize yourself. And in that moment, something loosens. The cage fades. The hunger quiets. Peace returns not because the world changed, but because you stopped giving it. The key is often the strongest person in the room is the quietest. Not because they lack words, but because they've already said the truth to themselves enough times that it no longer needs announcing. In a world addicted to noise, dominance, and performance, there is a rare kind of power that doesn't demand attention. It simply exists. Calm, grounded, unmoved. Asterisk, we're taught that power must be loud. It must occupy space and declare itself. But look closely at those who've mastered themselves. They don't rush to correct. They don't fight to win. They choose restraint, not weakness, but control. That kind of strength is built privately, in discipline and silence, moments when no one is watching. Seneca reminded us that humanity's greatest resources already exist within us. Included not the kind you display, but the kind you earn by outgrowing reactions and no longer needing to be louder just to feel seen. When you're grounded, your presence speaks for you. And nothing is more unsettling than someone who cannot be provoked. They don't flinch. They don't chase approval. Speaking to them feels like speaking to solid ground. Strength isn't being emotionless. It's knowing what deserves movement, what doesn't. It's letting feelings rise, letting them pass, and still choosing your response deliberately. Control doesn't shout. It watches. It waits. And it acts only when it matters. Silence isn't always passivity. There's just silence. That carries weight. In this world, you don't need more noise. You need less inner chaos, less reacting, less explaining. Be so aligned with who you are that you stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. That urge to dominate conversations, that's what weakens you. What strengthens you is the stillness that comes after you. Let it go. Jung once noted that loneliness doesn't come from being alone, but from being unable to express what truly matters. And yet, those who walk deeply eventually realize they don't need to explain everything. They live it. Their life becomes the message. Their consistency becomes the proof. Their quiet presence becomes undeniable. You don't need to be louder to be heard. You need clarity within yourself, because clarity doesn't scream. It speaks once and moves on. That is the art of strength, to set boundaries without begging, to walk away without threats, to lead without applause. True strength doesn't rise from ego. It rises from purpose. And like a tree in a storm, it doesn't argue with the wind. It stays rooted. A tree doesn't argue with the wind, doesn't protest the rain. It stands, rooted, present. That's who you become when you stop reacting to every challenge. When you understand that not every provocation deserves a reply. When you start treating your energy like currency because it is, every time you're dragged into pointless conflict, every time you defend your character to someone who never intended to respect it, you give away strength you'll never get back. You take it back, not by getting louder, but by standing more firmly. People often confuse power with fearlessness. But real power isn't the absence of fear. It's calm within fear. It's not never doubting yourself. It's refusing to let doubt drive your decisions. It's holding uncertainty without letting it hijack your direction. The most unsettling thing you can do is remain steady while everything else shakes. That isn't indifference. That's mastery. And mastery is quiet, the most formidable. Presence isn't loud or aggressive. It's the one that can't be baited. It's the one that won't be pulled into emotional chaos. The one who knows exactly who they are and doesn't need to prove it. That's what silence gives you. Not withdrawal leverage, not a path strategy. You can care deeply and still speak sparingly. You can love fully and still choose when to respond. Violence doesn't mean fear. Sometimes it means you're so grounded that nothing external can knock you off center. In the space between what happens and how you respond, stillness becomes your advantage. Not passive silence, but intentional restraint. The pause that allows wisdom to replace reflex. That pause builds an inner fortress when others can feel, even if they can't explain it. This year isn't asking you to be more aggressive. It's asking you to be more anchored, to stop wasting breath on distractions, to let results speak louder than arguments, to let actions establish credibility. When your focus sharpens, your energy becomes undeniable. People notice not because you're demanding attention, but because you've stopped asking for it. Let this be the year. You stop debating with people who aren't building what you're building. Step out of the noise. Step into your own rhythm. Let your stillness become your shield, because nothing unsettles the world more than someone who cannot be shaken. And once you reach the point where your silence speaks for you, you realize that was the strength you were searching for all along. Most people try to survive their past. Very few learn to love it. And love here doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean enjoying what hurt you. It means refusing to let it own you. This is amor fati, the love of fate, not poetry, a discipline. Decision. It's the moment you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what will I make of it now? There comes a moment, sometimes quiet, sometimes brutal, when everything you relied on collapses. A betrayal, a loss, future you were sure of, gone. Your instincts beg for escape. To rewind time, to erase pain, but you can't. No one can. And once you accept that, you face a deeper choice. Will the past define you, or will it refine you? Amor fati doesn't mean enjoying the storm. It means becoming someone who grows because of it. You gather the broken pieces and build something stronger. You take the silence left by loss and finally hear your own voice. You take failure and let it sharpen you instead of shrink you. Over time, you realize what felt like punishment was preparation. Marcus Aurelius wrote that fire turns everything thrown into it into fuel. That's amor fati, not passive acceptance, but transformation, using even the worst moments, not to harden into bitterness, but to burn with clarity. You weren't meant to remain untouched. You were meant to be shaped. What broke your heart? What humbled your ego? What stripped away illusion? Wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of a deeper one. Sometimes you have to lose your way to discover a path that only appears. When control disappears, a path built not on perfection, but on courage. Not on certainty, but on clarity. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Every day you cling to the fantasy of a different past. You delay that becoming. Amor fati isn't blind optimism. It's radical honesty. It's facing the wound and saying, "You no longer own me." It's letting pain exist without turning it into identity. You can resist reality forever, or you can unclench your fists and start building from exactly where you stand. Maybe the worst thing that happened to you handed you the tools to become unbreakable. Maybe what you hated most forced your deepest growth. Maybe fate isn't a fixed path, it's but raw material, and who you become depends on how you work with it. Nothing easy builds depth. Nothing smooth carves wisdom. It comes from falling apart, from sitting in silence long enough to hear yourself again, from realizing that while you can't choose every event, you can always choose what it makes of you. The moment you understand that, your relationship with life changes. You stop fearing loss. You stop being surprised by difficulty. You meet life with a steady heart, not because it's easy, because you no longer demand easy. Epictetus reminded us not to wish events away, but to align ourselves with how they unfold. That's not surrender, that's strength. You stop trying to rewrite the past and start using it. Every heartbreak, every failure, every mistake, not burdens-resources. And when you mine them for meaning, you become untouchable. Because the person who no longer fears fate cannot be controlled by outcomes. That's the hidden gift of amor fati. Freedom from your history. The courage to say, "This too is mine, and I will turn it into fuel." Your past doesn't need revision. Needs understanding. Every scar becomes a lesson. Every regret, a redirection. Every wound, a quiet guide back to yourself. And when you can finally say, "Even this I accept," you become unshakable, not because nothing can hurt you, but because nothing can own you anymore. It doesn't fight the wind, doesn't complain about the rain. It stands, rooted, unmoved. That's who you become when you stop reacting to every challenge thrown your way. When you understand that not every provocation deserves your voice, you begin to treat your energy like a limited resource, because it is. Every unnecessary argument drains you. Every time you explain yourself to someone who never intended to understand, you give away a piece of your strength. And this is the year you take it back, not by being louder, but by becoming steadier. People often confuse power with fearlessness. But true power isn't the absence of fear. It's calm in the presence of it. It's not about never doubting yourself. It's about refusing to let doubt dictate your actions. Strength is the ability to hold uncertainty without letting it control you. To remain grounded while everything around you trembles. That's not emotional distance. That's self-mastery. And mastery never announces itself. Doesn't need noise. The most formidable person in any room isn't the loudest. It's the one who cannot be provoked. It's the one who refuses to be emotionally manipulated. The one who knows who they are, what they stand for, and doesn't get pulled into chaos. That's what intentional silence gives you. Not withdrawal, but leverage. Not indifference, but clarity. You can care deeply and still choose restraint. You can love fiercely and still respond selectively. Silence doesn't mean weakness, sometimes. It means you're so grounded that nothing external can knock you off balance. Between what happens to you and how you respond, there's a space. And in that space, silence becomes power. Not passive silence, but deliberate stillness, the kind that allows you to pause, evaluate, and act from wisdom instead of impulse. That stillness becomes your inner stronghold. Others feel it heaven if they can't explain why. This year isn't asking you to be more aggressive. It's asking you to be more anchored, to stop wasting breath on distractions, to let your results speak louder than your explanations, to let consistency build your credibility. Because when your focus sharpens, your presence becomes intimidating, not because you demand attention, because you no longer seek it. Let this be the year you stop arguing with people who aren't building the life you're building. Step out of the noise. Step into your own rhythm. Let stillness become your shield, because nothing unsettles the world more than a person who cannot be shaken. Most people spend their lives trying to survive their past. Very few ever learn to make peace with it. And peace doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean liking what hurt you. It means refusing to let it define or destroy you. This is the essence of amor fati, the love of fate, not poetry, not optimism, but discipline. It's the decision to stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What will I do with what happened?" There's always a moment, sometimes quiet, sometimes devastating, where everything you expected collapses. A betrayal, a loss, a future you thought was secure, suddenly gone. Your instinct begs for escape, to rewind time, to erase pain, but you can't. No one can. And when you truly accept that, you face a deeper question. Will the past control me, or will I carry it differently? Amor fati doesn't mean enjoying the storm. It means becoming someone who grows because of it. You take broken pieces and create something new. You take the silence left behind and learn to hear your own voice. You take failure not as a verdict, but as refinement. What once felt like punishment begins to reveal itself as preparation. Marcus Aurelius said that fire turns everything thrown into it into flame. That is fate, properly understood, not passive acceptance, but transformation. You were never meant to remain untouched. You were meant to be shaped. What shattered your certainty? What humbled your ego? What stripped away illusions? It wasn't the end. It was the beginning of depth. Sometimes you have to lose your way to discover a path that only appears when there's nothing left to protect. And when you stop resisting what has already happened, something shifts. You stop fearing loss. You stop being shocked by hardship. You meet life with steadiness, not because it's easy, but because you're no longer asking it to be. Epictetus reminded us, don't demand life happen on your terms. Learn to move. With how it unfolds, that's not surrender, it's alignment. And once you see life that way, you stop trying to rewrite the past. You start using it. Every scar becomes instruction. Every regret, a redirection. Every wound, a guide back to yourself. The person who no longer fears fate cannot be controlled. Their power isn't tied to outcomes, it's tied to resilience. Fear, too, has been misunderstood. We treat it like a stop sign, but more often it's a doorway. The Stoics never tried to eliminate fear. They trained to understand it. Through Malor mentally rehearsing difficulty, they removed fear's element of surprise. Fear feeds on the unknown. Preparation strips it of authority. Most suffering happens before the event, not during it. We exaggerate pain, underestimate endurance, and that gap is where fear lives. Confronted directly, fear shrinks. Avoided, it grows. When you stop running, fear becomes information, signal pointing toward growth. Strength isn't acting without fear, it's acting with fear and choosing anyway. And finally, there is death. Not as an ending, but as urgency. Memento mori isn't about darkness. It's about awakening. When you remember that time is limited, hesitation loses power. You stop delaying truth. You stop postponing life. Death doesn't steal meaning, it sharpens it. You eat slower, you listen deeper, you stop assuming there will always be another chance. The tragedy isn't dying, it's never fully living. When mortality becomes your teacher, every moment asks a question. Is this how I want to spend my life? And when you answer honestly, you stop existing and start living deliberately, because life isn't a rehearsal. This is it. And remembering that doesn't make you afraid, it makes you awake. Seneca once warned us that life isn't short. We simply spend most of it carelessly. And that truth cuts deep, because it exposes something uncomfortable we're not losing. Life, because death arrives, We're losing it because we hand our energy to things that add no meaning. We scatter our attention on gossip. We exhaust ourselves in pointless arguments. We delay what matters, convincing ourselves there's always more time. Every distraction is a quiet surrender, trade where time is exchanged for emptiness. But the moment you truly remember that life is finite, the unnecessary begins to fall away. The noise loses its grip. The drama feels smaller. Other people's opinions stop carrying so much weight. You move lighter not because life suddenly becomes simple, but because you stop carrying burdens that were never yours. You speak more honestly. You take risks you once avoided. You release attachments you thought were permanent, because now you understand nothing is. And that realization doesn't imprison you. It liberates you. Even love changes when death is remembered. You hold people closer. You stop needing to win every argument. You recognize that every goodbye carries weight, so your voice softens. You forgive sooner. And when you say something, you mean it. You begin living in a way where if tomorrow never came, there would be very little left unsaid. That doesn't come from panic. It comes from wisdom. From the calm understanding that time was never promised stand. That's what makes today sacred. This awareness doesn't darken life. It sharpens it. You walk away from what drains your fire. You stop tolerating relationships that leave you hollow. You exit roles that shrink you, because you don't owe anyone your numbness. You owe yourself your aliveness. Even failure looks different now. It's no longer shame. It's evidence that you tried, that you risked, that you were awake. When you carry the truth of mortality with grace, you stop obsessing over outcomes. You show up for the process, not because it's easy, but because it's real and it's yours. Aristotle believed the good life wasn't about duration, but virtue. Not about how long you live, but how well. Living well isn't luxury. It isn't applause. It's alignment. It's honoring what you value, even when it costs you. It's walking a lonely path, because it's the honest one. And when the final moment comes, you won't remember perfection. You'll remember presence, truth, vitality. So don't waste this life scrolling past it. Don't silence your soul to fit a version of yourself you've outgrown. Let death teach urgency, not fear. It wake you up so fully that you never drift through your days. Again, because remembering death isn't about mourning what you'll lose. It's about finally seeing what you have earned, giving it everything, not someday, not when you're ready, but now, this breath, this heartbeat, that is enough. There are moments when the world grows unbearably loud. Your thoughts scatter. Everything. It feels urgent, yet nothing feels meaningful. In those moments, it's easy to forget that ancient philosophy wasn't designed for admiration. It was designed for survival. When the Stoics spoke of the four virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, they weren't offering comfort. They were offering anchors. Wisdom isn't knowing everything, seeing clearly. When chaos presses in, wisdom creates a pause. It asks not what feels good, but what's true. Not what's easy, but what's right. Marcus Aurelius wrote that. The obstacle doesn't block the path, it becomes the path. Wisdom doesn't erase difficulty. It teaches you how to use it. Courage follows wisdom, because seeing the right path doesn't make it painless. Courage is what moves your feet when fear tries to freeze you. You speak even when your voice trembles. You act even when doubt is loud. Not because you're fearless, but because shrinking feels worse. Courage is deciding that something matters more than comfort. Justice comes next, and it's the hardest when you're wounded. When betrayed, retaliation feels natural. But justice isn't revenge. It's restraint guided by principle. It's choosing fairness over impulse, balance over bitterness, and finally, temperance, the virtue most neglected today. To excess, temperance draws boundaries. Enough is enough. More isn't better. Faster isn't wiser. Temperance keeps desire from becoming your master. Together, these virtues aren't ideals. They're practices. They steady you when life pulls you apart. They give you poise when pressure rises. You won't embody them perfectly. It's not the goal. Alignment is when your actions reflect your values. When your choices echo your truth. Virtue doesn't announce itself. shows up in how you respond when you're tired, but no one is watching. When the easier option is right there, and when life inevitably tests you, these virtues become the structure that holds you together. You don't need permission to live this way. You don't need a crisis to begin, just a decision made again and again, to pause before reacting, to breathe before judging, to choose depth over impulse. That's how you become unshakable, not by avoiding storms, but by learning how to stand inside them with a steady heart. It isn't abnormal, it's simply common. And those two are not the same. You weren't designed to live in reaction mode. The Stoics never aimed to erase emotion. They trained to refine it. When anger surfaced, they didn't shove it down. They observed it. When jealousy appeared, they traced it back to the story fueling it. When fear spoke up, they listened with awareness instead of retreating in shame. That's the discipline. Not avoiding the storm, but becoming steady enough to remain standing inside it. Impulse is impatient. It demands action now, doesn't care about tomorrow, consequences, or cost. It's loud, urgent, and often misguided. Discipline is quieter. It waits. It watches. It asks questions before making moves. Discipline doesn't need recognition because it isn't performing. It's protecting what matters, your peace, your integrity. Your direction. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you strengthen that. Discipline. It's not through force, but through clarity. Imagine a world driven only by impulse. Anger instantly turning into violence. Sadness immediately becoming isolation. Insecurity transforming into attack. That world wouldn't survive. And yet many people live inside that chaos every day, not because they're broken, but because they were never taught another way. You don't have to live there. Emotion becomes dangerous only when it becomes authority. When you stop questioning it, when you obey it without reflection. Regret is born not from feeling, but from failing to pause. The person who hurt you isn't running your life, but they will if you hand them control over what you do with the energy they left behind. True strength isn't suppressing emotion or clenching your jaw until it passes. It's opening the door, listening carefully, learning the message, and then choosing your response deliberately, not from ego, not from fear, but from truth. Seneca once said that adversity is necessary because without it, you never get the chance to prove yourself. Your emotions are not obstacles to growth. They are entry points. They reveal what still unsettles you, what still triggers you, what still holds too much influence over your mind. But they also reveal your capacity to remain present, to tolerate discomfort, to stay grounded when it would be easier to escape. Each time you do that, you reclaim something essential. Don't fear emotion. Fear the belief that you are powerless. In its presence, fear the story that says feeling deeply means acting recklessly. It doesn't. Some of the strongest people feel more intensely than anyone else. They've simply learned how to hold those feelings without becoming them. That's what grounds them. It's what makes them trusted. That's what keeps them steady in a world that never slows down. Asterisk freedom doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from meeting it with awareness and choosing your next move from presence, not panic. Emotion may still visit, but it no longer takes over. That was the Stoic insight. And it's still relevant now. Power doesn't come from feeling less. It comes from using the space between feeling and action to choose who you become. You won't master this overnight. Some days you'll react. Some days you'll speak too fast or retreat too soon. That's part of learning. The goal isn't perfection. It's quicker return, shortening the distance between reaction and reflection, studying your triggers instead of judging them. Responding as a student, not a victim. That's how patterns break. That's how self-trust grows. Emotions deliver the message, but you write the ending. And once you understand that your relationship with your own mind changes, you stop fearing it. You begin working with it. Real control doesn't mean forcing stillness. It means learning how to stay still while everything inside you moves. There's a quiet confidence that comes from not being ruled by what you feel, not denying it, not drowning in it, but standing inside it, breathing, choosing, acting with intention, not to impress anyone, to stay aligned with who you're becoming, and that choice to live aligned. It's one of the most powerful decisions you'll ever make, because the world will provoke you. It will test you. It will try to pull you off center. Your task is simple. Stay grounded. Stay clear. Use the space. That space between emotion and action is where leadership begins. It's where a life forms that doesn't need constant explanation. Life guided by intention, not impulse. Where emotions are honored but not obeyed. That's how you become calm in chaos, clear in conflict, unmoved by noise, and deeply, unmistakably alive. Everything begins with discipline. You were never meant to be a finished product. Not at birth. It's not now. Not ever. You are movement. You are process. You are becoming. You are not a label to be finalized or a checklist. To be completed, you are not your worst moment. It's not your deepest scar. Not even your greatest achievement. You are something far more important than all. Of that, you are the one holding the chisel. Life doesn't hand you perfection. It hands you raw material, heavy, unfinished, cracked in places. The marble arrives, uneven, unpolished, sometimes damaged, but that was never the problem. The truth is this: you're both the sculptor and the sculpture. Most people never realize that. They move through life believing they are the stone, that circumstances define them, and mistakes sealed their shape. They say it's too late, too broken, too far behind, too much damage done. But none of that becomes true unless you accept. It is final. Unless you put the chisel down and decide the work is over. That's the real loss. It's not flawed material, but forgotten agency. You weren't born fixed. You were born equipped. With thought, with choice, with action, with reflection. With the courage to begin again, it's easy to blame the marble. To point at the cracks and say, this is what life gave me. But the Stoics never taught escape or complaint. They taught responsibility. This is what I have. Now what will I make of it? Every decision you make is a strike of the chisel. When you wake up early to protect your peace instead of feeding distraction, that's a cut. When you choose restraint over indulgence, that's refinement. When you pause before reacting with anger or fear, that's precision work. Moment by moment, the shape begins to change. It's slow. It's subtle, but it's real. And over time, a form starts to emerge. One that looks more and more like who you were meant to become. The chisel isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's the silence you choose instead of defending your ego. Sometimes it's a boundary set with a shaking voice. Sometimes it's simply not quitting one more repetition, one more hour, one more step forward. These moments don't get applause, but they define you. Because while the world waits for dramatic breakthroughs, real greatness is formed quietly in effort, in consistency. In the space between chaos and clarity, no one else can sculpt your life. Others may offer advice. They may criticize your process, they may hand you tools, but they don't guide your hands. Only you decide whether today's choices echo regret or resilience. Only you choose whether to carry the chisel or point blame, that forgotten power to shape. Yourself through action is everything. You are allowed to evolve, allowed to change direction, allowed to say, this way no longer fits me. That isn't failure, it's mastery. A sculptor doesn't panic when something breaks away. They adjust, they rework the vision. They adapt. That flexibility combined with purpose is what it means to be human. Your masterpiece isn't behind you. It exists in every future moment you choose to keep shaping. The marble was never the issue. The issue is forgetting how much can be created from imperfect material. Some of the most meaningful lives were shaped from trauma, loss, and abandonment. Not because life was gentle, but because pain was turned into depth. They didn't sculpt perfection, they sculpted meaning. That's real artistry. Not surface-level beauty, but substance. Too many people wait for better conditions. A cleaner slate, a perfect starting point. But waiting doesn't shape anything. Waiting leaves the marble untouched, and neglect erodes potential faster than failure ever could. Life doesn't ask you to wait. It asks you to engage, to work with what you have, where you are. Now, while others wait to feel ready, you can be carving, turning chaos into clarity, stress into stillness, pain into purpose. Asterisk. It won't always look graceful. Sometimes dust fills the air. Sometimes a piece breaks that you thought you needed. That's how real work looks. Masterpieces aren't created in theory. They're created in motion, in mess and effort that never makes the highlight reel. You don't need a perfect blueprint. You need commitment. Commitment to not let your life harden into wasted potential. So don't just survive the coming year. Shape it. Don't just pass through your days. Design them. Turn routine into ritual. Struggle into strategy. Silence into strength. There is no secret tool coming. You already have what matters: thought, choice, and time. And time is not infinite. Every day unused removes a piece of the marble. Every day engaged shapes it. That's legacy. Let your habits do the carving. Let them remove what isn't essential. Let them reveal your true outline. Not the version that conforms or hides, but the one that stands steady and says, "This is who I choose to be." That version doesn't arrive by accident. It's built through repetition, patience, and attention. Future isn't something you discover. It's something you carve. Not all at once, but choice by choice, hour by hour, in moments no one sees. And one day, someone will look at your life, not the highlights, but the truth, and they'll recognize the strength etched into it. They'll know it wasn't luck, it was intention. So the real question isn't what kind of life you were given. It's this: what will you create from it? You don't need perfection. You need direction. One choice. One moment. One deliberate cut at a time. The masterpiece isn't waiting to be found. It's waiting to be shaped. Pick up the chisel. Your life isn't a draft. It's the final piece. And if this stirred something in you, there's another video on your screen that goes even deeper. Watch it next and keep carving.